Hello and welcome to BYJU'S IAS. Let's take up the daily quiz for today. The first question: Uttarakhand is vulnerable to which of the following disasters? Earthquakes, landslides, cloud bursts, glacial bursts, forest fires. The correct answer is option D. Uttarakhand is vulnerable to all the five given disasters. See, Uttarakhand is highly prone to a variety of disasters. And if you look at the hazard map for the state, its vulnerabilities become very clear. See, Uttarakhand sits in the Himalayan belt, which is highly prone to disasters due to its young and unstable nature. The state sits in a very seismically active zone, and hence it's highly vulnerable to earthquakes and as well as to landslides. And along with that, climate change and unsustainable development of infrastructure in the state has contributed to cloudburst events, flash floods, glacial bursts, and they have all taken a huge toll on the state. During the summer season, the state is also vulnerable to forest fires. And just a few weeks back, Uttarakhand witnessed an unprecedented forest fire. This question on the disaster vulnerability and hazard map of Uttarakhand was taken up because of this article in the Hindu. According to the article, the Border Roads Organization has reported yet another glacier break in Uttarakhand. And according to available reports, a number of people have already lost their lives to this disaster. And this comes just a couple of months after Uttarakhand witnessed massive flash floods due to a glacial burst that occurred earlier this year in February. Let's look at the second question. India draws its human rights obligations from Protection of Human Rights Act of 1993, Universal Declaration of Human Rights adopted by the UN, rights guaranteed under the Constitution. All the three are correct, so option D is the right answer. See, the Protection of Human Rights Act of 1993 led to the establishment of the National Human Rights Commission as a statutory institution responsible for defending human rights in the country. Then the Universal Declaration of Human Rights was adopted by the UN General Assembly in 1948, and India is a party to this declaration. Then under our constitution, several rights have been guaranteed, including right to life, right to liberty, equality, etc., all of which are integral to human rights. So we can say that India draws its human rights obligations from all the three provisions that are mentioned over here. This question was taken up because we have this article in the Hindu that makes a reference to the National Human Rights Commission, which has taken up a set of 6 studies on various human rights issues, such as food security for the scheduled castes and scheduled tribes, extent of cyber exploitation of children, falling participation of women in workforce, and these studies of the NHRC are designed to help fulfill its legal and constitutional obligations. Let's look at the third question. Which of the following statements are correct? ASEAN grouping is open for membership to all countries in the Asia Pacific region. No ASEAN country shares a land border with India. India is one of the founding members of ASEAN. Amongst the given statements, all the three are incorrect, so option D is the right answer. See, ASEAN is a regional grouping of 10 Southeast Asian countries, and it is not open to membership for any other country. It is primarily an economic grouping that brings together 10 Southeast Asian countries, which also includes Myanmar, thus making the second statement incorrect, because Myanmar is an immediate neighbor of India and it shares a land border with India. Hence, it is often said that Myanmar is like a land bridge between India and Southeast Asia. Then the third statement is also incorrect because India is not one of the founding members of ASEAN. But India does have very close relations with the ASEAN grouping, and it enjoys the status as one of its dialogue partners. In fact, India is even a part of the ASEAN Plus 6, which provides for close interaction between the ASEAN countries and the 6 dialogue partners of ASEAN that includes India, China, South Korea, Japan, Australia, and New Zealand. This question on ASEAN was taken up because according to this article in the Hindu, protesters in Myanmar have stepped up their protests ahead of the ASEAN meet in order to highlight the political and human rights situation in Myanmar. Now let's look at the fourth question. Which country is known for having self-defense forces in the place of regular armed forces? Switzerland, Norway, Japan, Finland. The correct answer is option C, Japan. See, Japan doesn't have regular armed forces like other countries. Instead, it has something known as self-defense forces that were established in 1954. This is a result of its pacifist constitution. See, during the Second World War, Imperial Japan, which was on the side of Axis powers, it was known for committing military atrocities across Asia. Japan's then military had committed such grave acts of violence and brutality across Asia that even today, these incidents trigger diplomatic issues with countries like China and South Korea, which were affected by Imperial Japan during the Second World War. So, at the end of the Second World War, after Japan was nuked by the US, and after it surrendered at the end of the conflict, the Allied powers, which emerged victorious, led by the United States, pushed Japan to adopt a pacifist constitution through which Japan's military was disarmed and Japan was made to adopt a sovereign stand against any acts of belligerence, and Japan even renounced war as an option. But for the safety and defense of Japan, self-defense forces were set up instead of regular armed forces. Hence, today Japan doesn't have regular armed forces like other countries, but instead it has self-defense forces. Japan's land, naval, and air forces, they are referred to as self-defense forces. Then, to further guarantee the security and defense of Japan, in 1951, the United States signed a security treaty with Japan, through which the US committed to guarantee the external security of Japan. This treaty is in use even today because whenever Japan and China have clashes in the South China Sea and the East China Sea, Japan often invokes this treaty with the US to remind China that the United States is also a stakeholder in the East China Sea. This question was taken up because according to this article in the Hindu, Japan is going to host a joint military exercise with US and France. This is the first such large-scale exercise being held in Japan, which involves the ground troops from all the three countries, and it comes at a time when tensions between Japan and China have already increased in the East China Sea over the Senkaku-Diaoyu Island dispute. And these planned military exercises involving US and France shows that both US and France see themselves as stakeholders in the Indo-Pacific region. Now let's take up a question from the 2019 prelims paper. With reference to British colonial rule in India, consider the following statements. Mahatma Gandhi was instrumental in the abolition of the system of indentured labor. In Lord Chelmsford's war conference, Mahatma Gandhi did not support on recruiting Indians for world war. Consequent upon the breaking of salt law by Indian people, the Indian National Congress was declared as illegal by the colonial rulers. Amongst the given statements, the second statement is incorrect, so option B is the right answer. See, Mahatma Gandhi did play an instrumental role in the abolition of the indentured labor system, and the Indian National Congress was declared as illegal after the salt satyagraha by the British government. But however, during Lord Chelmsford's war conference, Mahatma Gandhi did extend support to recruiting Indians for the war efforts. So this makes the second statement incorrect. So option B is the right answer. Now coming to the fact of the day, let's look at this article in the Hindu and understand what do you mean by the ways and means advances of the RBI. According to this article, the Reserve Bank of India has decided to continue with the existing interim ways and means advances scheme limit for all states and union territories for 6 more months, given the current economic situation created by the pandemic. See, ways and means advances is basically a short-term loan facility that is offered by the RBI to the central government and as well as to the state governments. It allows the central and state governments to borrow funds from the RBI. But these borrowings are purely meant to help out the state and central governments to overcome temporary mismatches in cash flows with regard to their receipts and expenditure. Whenever there is a temporary mismatch in receipts and expenditure of the government due to unstable cash flows, they can borrow funds from the RBI on a short-term basis, and this is known as ways and means advances. This facility of the RBI is guided as per Section 17 Clause 5 of the RBI Act, and the RBI charges an interest rate on this advance, which is basically the repo rate. Repo rate is the rate at which RBI lends money to the banks, and at the same rate, governments which borrow from the RBI under the ways and means advances facility would also be charged. This lending by the RBI is basically a short-term loan with a tenure of just 3 months. If required, the states are even allowed an overdraft facility through which they can borrow even in excess of the WMA limit that has been set by the RBI. In case if a state avails itself of such overdraft facility, then this extra borrowing would be charged at 2 percentage points above the repo rate. Then also note that no state can run an overdraft with the RBI for more than a certain specified period. So this concludes our discussion for today. Thanks for watching.